Your last name?
Jeremy Ryan Ellingson, Ellingson.
Mr. Ellingson, before you testify this morning, I'm required by law to advise you on the penalties for perjury in the state of North Dakota. Perjury is a Class C felony, punishable by a maximum fine of $10,000, a maximum 5 years imprisonment, or both. Do you understand what perjury is?
Yes.
Being advised of potential penalties for perjury, do you promise to tell the truth in this case today?
I do.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Malbach.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, Mr. Ellingson.
Morning.
Mr. Ellingson, by whom are you employed?
Ellingson Drainage Incorporated.
What's your position with Ellingson Drainage Incorporated?
I am the Chief Operating Officer.
Can you generally describe the company's business?
Ellingson is a 53-year-old construction business. We primarily have been in agriculture for most of our tenure. We also specialize in a lot of different types of horizontal directional drilling utility work. We do a little bit of infrastructure management, but as I said, most of our focus is in the ag market today.
How many employees does the company have?
We have around 400.
And in the agricultural line of business, Mr. Ellingson, is that largely focused on the water management business?
Yes, I would say 95% of our business in the ag sector is water management.
When did you join the company?
I started in 1994.
What was your position back then?
I was a field laborer.
Mr. Ellingson, where are the company's offices located?
Our corporate office is in a small town called West Concord, Minnesota, near Rochester. We have a very large satellite office in Harwood, North Dakota, just to the north side of Fargo. We also have field offices in Wahpeton, Grand Forks, and we have an office in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania.
Who are Ellingson's clients typically in what we've called the water management business?
Mostly growers. Sometimes we work for land managers or investment firms, but I would say 90% is directly with the growers.
Would it be fair, Mr. Ellingson, to call the water management business the drain tile business?
Sure.
Can you estimate the amount of drain tile that the company installs on an annual basis in the Red River Valley?
Probably somewhere around 30 million feet a year.
For context, could you estimate what percentage that 30 million feet per year is of all the tile installed in the valley in a year?
I would say it's probably 50%, maybe a little more.
Does the company have clients whose properties are crossed by the pipeline route?
Yes.
Give a general description of what the water management or drain tile business is. What's the point of it?
Now, in simple terms, it's basically the removal of excess water on any given farm field to increase crop production.
Why is the removal of excess water important?
The crop health in high water table areas can be stunted or not producing maximum yield when you don't have your water properly managed. We artificially lower the water table to increase the root of the crops to ensure that maximum yield can be gained. It also allows growers to get into their farms earlier in the season, reduces compaction and erosion, and even some fuel costs in certain situations.
Can you give a real basic description of how a drain tile system works, what its components are, and what they do?
Sure. Typically, a drain tile system is started with a topographic survey of the farm to understand the grade and elevation. It's critical. All drain tile lines are gravity flow. We then determine an outlet location, whether it needs to be a free-flowing outlet or a lift station or a pump. At that point, we engineer the system for proper materials based on soil types, spacings, K-set values in the soil, different engineering things that go into making sure a drain tile system is installed properly. We then install it with a large brawn drainage plow with a crew of guys. We use typically most of the tile is a 4-inch plastic HDPE material. The mains are larger than that. They're installed 3 to 4 feet deep on most farms, with the exception of mains being deeper occasionally. And really, in a nutshell, that's how a water management system is installed.
You mentioned the systems are gravity flow. How do you account for flatter areas and making sure that the water still moves?
Just ensure that everything's installed on proper grade. It's very critical.
And how do you ensure that everything is installed on a proper grade?
All of our crews are equipped with either lasers or GPS technology to do that.
Mr. Ellingson, what's the company's role in connection with the Summit Pipeline project?
We have partnered with Summit as their agricultural drain tile mitigation partner. We've been involved for about 15 months.
The company served in a similar role on other pipeline projects?
Yes.
Is your engagement with Summit for the last 15 months typical of your past experience with pipeline projects?
Not typical, very few projects. I feel Summit has went above and beyond with the way they've managed and approached drain tile on this project.
In what ways do you think the company has gone above and beyond
Typically,
the drain tile?
Typically on the pipeline projects where we repair drain tile, it's done after, it's kind of an afterthought during construction. Sometimes we're involved, sometimes a general contractor does it. There might not always be a lot of expertise. On this project, we've been brought in ahead of time. We're planning and engineering right alongside Summit's team to ensure that all the drain tile are found, repaired, and kept at or better than when it started.
Is Ellingson's relationship with Summit a subcontractor through a general contractor, or is it a direct relationship?
No, we are working direct for Summit.
Is that typical?
Not typically, no.
Do you think that direct contract is a good thing?
I think it's a great thing.
Why?
It gives us the flexibility to work directly with the landowners when any issues arise. We ensure that lots of different things are taken into consideration before the pipeline is construction, location of drain tile, how many, making sure there's enough resources there timely to repair them, looking at elevations of major main tile lines to ensure that the pipeline depth is installed so it doesn't conflict. The running line, as I talked before, grade is so important on a drain tile job. And documentation is probably the other big thing. We have a GIS system in-house that documents the drain tile size. We take pictures, so it's really easy for the landowner to get as-built or understand what happened on his farm even after the fact.
Sure. And we'll get to that, the documentation of the fixes and such in a little bit here, but you testified that the company's been on the job for 15 months or so. We're just here now at a permit hearing.
Yep.
What have you been doing for the last 15 months?
We've been supporting Summit at landowner meetings, answering questions. We've been doing a lot of engineering. We've done tile map collection from landowners, working with them on any concerns or questions that they have as it relates to the drain tile on their farm. We've been working with local NRCS or public service offices to gather as many tile maps and drainage information as we can to ensure that everything is captured before construction. And we're also doing a high-level aerial photo image research in areas that we know there could be possibly tile, but maybe the landowner doesn't have maps.
And in those areas where the landowner doesn't have maps, how do you find it on the aerial surveys?
Lots of years experience. We look for typical imagery that's taken at the right time of year. And we've got engineers in-house that have gotten seasoned at recognizing drain tile. It's not a perfect science, but it's better than nothing.
You're doing that for the entire pipeline route?
Yes.
The goal is to locate in advance of construction, all tile?
That's our goal.
You think you'll be able to accomplish that?
We're hoping most of it.
Let's talk a little bit about as we go into the construction phase of the pipeline project. What will Ellingson Company's role be during that phase?
We'll play 3 parts. One, will be involved up front in the planning with the contractors and the documentation and location of the tiles as the trench is being cut, kind of the pre-planning, pre-construction phase. During construction, we'll be repairing the tile behind the general contractors, ensuring that they get put back to better or as they were. And then we'll be doing documentation and as-built data collection as the repairs are completed, and then also available after construction for any issues that may come up.
In the beginning phase, how are you going to locate and mark the lines as the spreads actually move out for construction?
We will have field engineer personnel on every spread that will be available to answer landowner questions around drain tile. They'll also be working alongside Summit surveyors and our GPS team to document and locate the tiles as they're hit.
Will landowners have access to that information as the process is ongoing?
Yes, we have a GIS dashboard that at any time we can talk with a landowner about their concerns. With gathering the tile maps and information ahead of time, our team will have them at their fingertips to help address any questions or problems a landowner may have.
When you say that Ellingson will have personnel out with every spread, you mean an actual Ellingson employee?
Yes.
Is it fair to say, Mr. Ellingson, as the pipeline construction gets underway, the tile is going to be cut or damaged or broken?
Yes.
When the repairs are done, and we'll describe them or we'll go through them here in a minute, is that section of tile that is replaced going to be as strong as or better than the tile before the project came along?
It should be better. We typically use a heavy highway plastic tile material to repair the crossings encased in a steel casing to ensure there's no damage or settling issues that occur.
Why don't you take us through a little bit more of the actual process of making that permanent repair?
Sure. We locate the repair and we dig back on each tile line into the banks, into virgin ground, several feet to ensure that no extra tile has been crushed or damaged during excavation. Our crews will then replace that tile with a heavy highway grade agricultural drain tile. It's used along highways. It's a little thicker than your normal day-to-day agricultural drain pipe to ensure there's extra strength. It'll be encased in a upsized steel culvert. So for example, a 4-inch tile will be encased in a 6-inch culvert. That will span the trench and lay approximately 8 to 10 feet into the banks. And then we use sandbags on top of the pipeline to support the pipe in the center, just to ensure that there's no issues with settling during backfill.
When you say the sandbags, that's being used to support the drain tile that sits above the pipeline.
Correct.
So are there concerns after the permanent repair is done that the drain tile is going to settle in the area of the pipeline?
Not in the way they're being installed here.
You talked about lasers earlier. Is that part of the process of the repair?
Yes, that's probably the most critical process, is ensuring that the drain tiles get connected back together correctly and that they're put on grade.
How do you document the repairs that are made?
Our field engineer staff that works alongside our crew takes pictures. We document station location via the pipeline maps. We also GPS and survey in the points of connections, so we have them. We also document size and any other pertinent information, date it was done, who completed it, and we keep record of all that digitally.
That information is made available to landowners?
Yes.
After the repairs are completed, will the landowners know as much about the tile that's been repaired as any other tile in their field?
They should.
In your experience, Mr. Ellingson, is it common for the company to get called back on a job like this or after a job like this to repair the repair?
Not typically. We've been fixing tile on pipeline projects for probably 30 plus years, and I remember very few we've been called back
on. Now, if we think about the tile that may exist in this area, pattern tile, right? Can you describe what pattern tile is?
Pattern tiling is just basically tiling the entire farm on a set spacing based on soil and drainage coefficients that are provided and needed to properly drain soil. They can be anywhere from 30 to 40 feet up to 80 to 100 feet, depending on when the system is installed.
There can be a large number of tile lines in a field in a pattern system, right?
Correct.
In the case of a pattern tile system that's being intersected by the pipeline, it can involve a large number of tile crossings and repairs.
Yes.
Number of repairs cause you concern for restoring the functionality of the system?
Not really. No, we've been doing this for a long time, and we've hit projects with 60 to 80 repairs in one farm and have been successful repairing them.
In terms of a repair, is it a matter of simply reconnecting the 60 or 80 lines, or are there alternative solutions?
Yeah, on an occasion, if it makes sense, we're offering some of the landowners or growers the option to install header systems if they would like.
What's a header system?
A header system is just basically the process of rerouting the drain tile ahead of pipeline construction, intercepting the laterals on the upside of the pipeline, capping them on the downside, and minimizing the number of crossings at construction. So a farm that would have 40 to 50 laterals might only have 2 or 3 crossings that have to be dealt with during construction. The rest would have been rerouted.
Ellingson has been working with Summit and landowners on figuring out those solutions at this stage of the project.
Yes.
Who makes the decision about whether to go forward with a particular type of repair or a header system replacement? Is that the company's decision?
Landowners.
Who pays for the work?
Summit.
Are landowners required to use Ellingson to complete the work?
They're not required to use Ellingson to complete the header system work, but they are required to work through us and with us to ensure that all of the integrity, documentation, safety is all in place and documented correctly and properly.
Summit has you as their point person to make sure that the pipeline and the drain tile are compatible.
Yes.
We look out into the future just a little bit. Will landowners be able to install tile systems in the future on properties where the pipeline?
Yes, we install projects every day with pipelines in them.
Are there particular things that a landowner or their contractor is well advised to do when they're working around a pipeline?
Yeah, typically we try and avoid it as much as possible when installing a new system in an existing pipeline property. We'll header it off, similar to a header system when we install that, and then cross it probably the least amount of times as possible to make the system work.
And how about in terms of safely working around the pipeline? Are there typical steps?
Yeah, most of the time there's a watchdog from the pipeline representation when we cross pipelines. We do a utility one call on every project to help locate that. We've done lots of them. It's a pretty safe process.
Mr. Ellingson, you worked on a lot of pipeline projects. Do you have a view overall as to Summit's approach on drain tile issues?
Objection irrelevant. Foundation.
Objections noted, I'll allow him to answer.
Go ahead.
I feel Summit has went above and beyond in this project. We've done a lot of pipeline projects, tried to get involved with other owners early on. We've been successful with a few of them. I think they're really setting precedence on this project, the way that they've approached it as far as drain tile mitigation goes.
Mr. Ellingson, in your opinion, will the drain tile systems on every piece of land crossed by the pipeline in North Dakota be put into as good as or better a condition after the pipeline is built?
Yes.
Foundation.
Objections noted.
Do you have any,
Already answered, so it's on the record.
do you have any doubts about that?
Objection, foundation.
Objections noted. You can answer.
No.
Thank you. I didn't have anything further from Mr. Ellingson.
Mr. Pelham, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Ellingson. Just want to ask you some follow-up questions on the examination by Mr. Wahlberg. Starting in reverse order here in my notes, you testified, sir, that landowners aren't required to use Ellingson to do the work, but they have to work with Ellingson to a degree. So does that mean that a competitor of Ellingson's could do the work so long as Ellingson is a consultant? How would that work?
Yeah, as long as they meet all the requirements needed for the pipeline, they could help perform the work. Yeah, they need to work with us as you said, a consultant to ensure everything is done correctly.
Do you know whether or not a company would pay for that work to be done by someone other than an Ellingson? Landowner chose to use someone else?
Yeah, it would all be managed through us and Summit.
But Summit would pay that.
Yes.
The header systems, how many landowners, to your knowledge, sir, are using that alternative?
With this just being the permit stage, we're pretty early in the process. We've probably done a small amount of them at this point, but we're also still in the data collection phase. We got a ways to go to get all the tile maps in to produce them.
Do you know, sir, how landowners are being educated as to this as being an option?
Through the land agents, Summit has also created in conjunction with us a drain tile fact sheet, and our team is available in any meeting requested by a landowner to help understand drain tile better.
You were asked by Mr. Wahlberg as far as whether or not it's typical for sort of re-repair, coming back after a repair, and I think you testified that it's been seldom. I'm wondering, for the times that Ellingson has been called back to fix an issue that had been repaired, is there any type of common denominator, common theme where there's an issue with the drain tile that has to be repaired for a second or subsequent times?
Not really.
Could you give us some examples of situations where Ellingson has been involved coming back after a pipeline project having repaired, and then having to also come back later to repair an issue with the repair?
Typically, a landowner will have a wet spot near the pipeline. Our GIS systems allow us to pinpoint exactly where we did the repair. We typically then work with the landowner to identify the issue. If it's something in relation to the pipeline or something else going on in their farm, we typically have a survey and repair team that goes out and troubleshoots that. And if there is a repair that is needed, we make that. It could be something as simple as a coupler pulled apart, or it could be abandoned tile causing problems, something that wasn't caught. There's several different things, but usually our team does a pretty good job of making sure that things don't happen.
Fair enough. And I'm just wondering, sir, as far as the length of time that Ellingson would be involved in repairing issues after the line is constructed, is there a contractual time limitation that Ellingson is involved with Summit that you can say?
From the way I understand it, someone is offering a lifetime repair guarantee for all the drain tiles. So we would be coming alongside them as long as needed.
So if a landowner comes to Ellingson 5 years later and said, hey, there's an issue with this area that had been repaired, it's your testimony that Ellingson and the company would honor that repair obligation to the landowner. Is that your testimony? You asked about the documentation that is anticipated to be done. The documentation, and then you testify, I believe, that it would be available to the landowner. Is that by landowner request, or is that something that is just simply handed over to them?
The summit team will be handling, all the documentation back and forth through the land agents, I'm assuming. So it would probably be given to them by summit representative.
When the repairs are made to the drain tile systems, is a new map created by Ellingson as part of that process for their drain tile system?
We have a documented in our GIS system, and yes, update the map that all these tile have been repaired.
So included in the documents that would be provided to the landowners, would that map be included in those documents?
Yes.
You testified, sir, that you don't have concerns about settlement around where the tile is repaired and the line is constructed. I'm just wondering if you could expound on that or explain a little bit more why you don't have concerns about settlement.
Past history, we've done a lot of projects this way with really good success. The engineering, when you look at a steel culvert spanned across the width of the trench, has more than enough support characteristics to keep it from settling. And then as an extra precaution, we install sandbags to support it in the middle just in case there's any issues. And we're backfilling the pipe, and I trust our guys. They do a good job.
As far as determining, and I don't know if you have anything to do with this, and probably not, but I'll ask it anyways. The routing of the line is not something that Ellingson is doing, correct?
No.
So the routing of the line isn't being done by Ellingson. Do you have an opinion, sir, as far as how the line crosses land with a drain tile system installed? Is there a better way to cross it? Is it diagonal? Is it better? Is it 90-degree angles better? Do you have an opinion on that?
Not really. There's all different considerations that go into laying out and designing a pipeline that, decisions are made off of. I can tell you that a lot of the landowners, as they've been met with Summit, our team has participated in conversation about how it's routed across their farm and how it's going to impact their tile, which, as I said before, is going above and beyond, I feel, for Summit, something that probably has never been done to this level on a pipeline project.
So a pipeline coming across a land that's diagonal in nature, is there something different that is done by Ellingson to repair that tile versus a line that is coming at a 90-degree angle, say up a right-of-way along a county road or something like that?
Not typically.
You testified, sir, that you're hoping that you're going to locate most of the tile. The portion, let's say, for example, that isn't realizing that there is some tile that is missed and isn't located. Is there a plan in place for that tile that is sort of unexpectedly located during the construction?
Well, let me clarify that answer from before. We're trying to locate as much tile pre-construction as we can. During construction, we should get every tile. Our field engineers on site, as the excavators are digging the pipeline, we will be there documenting the lines as they cut through. So I would say with 99.5%, we should get most of the tile lines. If not, it's why Summit's partnered with us for the lifetime of the project, that if something is missed, we will come back and fix it.
Thank you, sir. I don't have any other questions for you. Mr. Shook may have some.
Just a couple. So there was some discussion earlier about you having some input into the depth of the pipeline, because you were kind of talking about how the grade is very important with the drain tile. So will Ellingson have control over the depth of the actual pipeline that's being installed?
Our job is to notify the general contractors of where the tile systems are ahead of time so they can plan the depth of their pipeline into that. And any lines that may cause issue or conflict, we'll make them aware of that to readjust that in the pre-planning stages.
So is it possible they would install the pipeline, I think a companies propose to install it at 4 feet of depth. Would they potentially go down to 6 feet or 8 feet in some areas if that would make that portion of repairs easier? Or
Yes.
and how close do you normally install the drain tile to a pipeline? So let's say they did in that scenario that they buried the pipe down to 6 feet. Would you be able to go across that pipeline with drain tile at a depth of 4 feet?
Typically, we shoot for 12 inches of separation between the pipeline and the drain tile.
Is there a limitation of what the minimum distance between the pipeline and the drain tile is?
I don't think so. There may be some stuff in different states that are different, but here I'm not sure that there is anything.
And you would go over the top of the line, generally speaking, or underneath it?
Over top of it.
The top?
Yep.
Would there be any scenarios where underneath would make more sense, or?
No, as we talked before, with the drain tile lines being graded, that's very difficult to do unless it's really deep.
That's all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
Mr. Jordy, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you. Sir, is your company, was it started by your father, grandfather?
Grandfather.
All right, and in your role as COO, what percentage of your day is in the field?
Today, probably 5%.
And you've made a lot of claims here today about what Summit will or won't do. Who told you what Summit would or won't do? Who gave you that information?
Jimmy Powell, the COO of Summit.
All right, is it fair to say anything you're repeating that Mr. Powell told you, you have no personal knowledge if in fact that is true or not? You're just repeating what he told you, correct?
As it relates to the warranty with the landowners.
All right, have you seen a copy of this warranty?
I have not seen a copy of the warranty.
Or would you be surprised to learn there is no such written warranty?
No.
And when you make these claims that there's a lifetime guarantee, who told you that?
Summit.
Would you be surprised to learn there's no such lifetime guarantee in the easement contracts they're offering landowners?
No.
And in terms of any warranty, does the landowner have a direct contract with your company, or is it all through Summit?
We are contracted through Summit.
All right, so the landowner doesn't have a signed contract with you. Do you believe a landowner could sue you for work that was done improperly?
Objection, relevance.
Maybe relevance. I don't know if to me, that's a legal conclusion that
Well,
maybe you can rephrase it. I don't know what you're getting at, but.
Well, what I'm getting at is he's made all sorts of claims of how wonderful this is. They've never had a problem, and basically nothing for the PSC to be concerned about. But let's get into who warranties what. I mean, there's a lifetime warranty. Do they stand behind it? Who's standing behind it? That's what I want to know. What can these landowners in this audience rely upon? Are you standing behind and guaranteeing, sir, that your company will pay for and repair at your cost any damage that you may cause, or your repairs may not be sufficient to a landowner?
I'm going to object to the extent this witness is being asked to make commitments contractually about all sorts of hypotheticals in a single statement. It's an inappropriate question.
I think it was a complex question, but I think you've established that they're contracted through Summit, so.
Okay, so just to be clear, sir, Ellingson, you do not have a contract that you sign with the landowners, correct?
Not directly, no. We're working for Summit.
All right, and in Summit's alleged lifetime warranty, would you be surprised to learn that Summit only offers repair features for so long as they are utilizing the easement? All right, so Summit sells this project the day after it's approved. You understand that Summit then would have no more responsibility to that landowner.
Objection, that calls for a legal conclusion about Summit's responsibilities to landowners under agreements that the Ellingson companies are not party to, who's already testified to that.
It's my understanding you plan to call Mr. Powell. I think those are better questions for him than this witness.
And that's totally fine. This witness has said all the things that Summit are going to do. That came in direct, and now they're trying to prevent him from explaining what Summit allegedly is going to do. So either you know it or you don't know it. So I'll continue. Sir, have you read the contract, the easement contract Summit's offering to North Dakota landowners?
I have seen it.
Okay.
I have not read the entire thing.
You have not read it. All right, very good. Has Summit made any comments to you other than the blanket "will take care of everything" comment in terms of what the process is whereby they determine if the damage that a landowner believes they found was or was not caused by you or Summit?
Can you restate the question? I'm not sure I understand.
Yes. What is the process of, say you're out there and you sever a tile line or you don't do a repair properly? What's the process? What is your understanding that now landowner has a problem? What do they do to be made whole?
The landowner would contact the land agent they've been working for, would in turn contact us to come out and troubleshoot the issue.
All right, and would you agree that only if Summit decides, yes, this is a problem in their sole discretion, do they have any responsibility to direct you to repair anything?
I really don't think that is going to be a Summit conclusion. They've hired us to do that for them.
Okay, so you believe it's your responsibility to make the call whether or not your own company failed to repair something properly?
Correct.
All right.
Simple warranty we have on every project we do as Ellingson.
Okay, so you're self-policing.
Of course.
All right, so the landowner has to count on you that you will say, yes, we screwed this up, and yes, you, Summit, should pay landowner.
Correct.
What do you have a written contract with Summit?
Yes.
All right, did you bring a copy of that today?
Do not have a copy of
Is that a copy you can provide the commission?
Sure.
What's your financial arrangement?
Objection.
It was Tobias of his entire testimony.
I can make my,
Sure, you can make your objection.
the contents of a contract, sure, a bias question, but the compensation arrangement, the other contractual arrangements are not relevant to the issues being considered by the commission. And they're confidential and proprietary contracts.
They're relevant to his testimony. They've put all this in play.
The idea that we put all of this in play has some guardrails to it. We have direct testimony. We have the decisions that the commission needs to make. Attempting to do discovery on the contractual underpinnings of this goes, I think, too far.
Can you remind me what your question was? Did you ask what the...
I wish I could. It was something, oh, yes. I want to know the financial compensation arrangement for this witness who's paid to be here today and part of his contract. I want to understand. I think it's important that we all know the financial arrangement here.
Are you talking about financial arrangement for him testifying today, or in general his company's financial relationship with Summit for this project?
Well, both. I mean, they're one and the same. I mean, I want to understand and make it clear this witness bias for the revenue generation that will occur if and only if this project is approved.
I'm going to note the objection, but I will let him answer generally. I mean, if it gets into... I think generally describing that relationship isn't necessarily confidential, but if Mr. Malberg's going to object again, and I'll address it then. So if you want, maybe start with, do you want general financial relationship between his company and Summit, or did you want to talk about today first? If we could break it up, I think that's going to be easier to address that way.
I appreciate that. I'll even start further back. Who contacted who for your company to be involved in this potential project?
I began working with the Rassetter family and Jimmy early on in this project to discuss the drain tile issues on this project, as it's a Midwestern job. And everyone understands the impact drain tile has. And it's part of, I think, Summit going above and beyond and being proactive in addressing it early on. I've probably been talking with Summit closer to 2 years about how we can make sure that the landowners' needs are met as it relates to drain tile on this job. And I guess you had mentioned earlier, I'll make a real quick comment.
Well, that's okay. What question do you think you just answered?
You asked me when we were basically began being engaged with Summit.
All right, and you didn't tell me. When were you engaged?
It's objection. It's asked and answered. He described when he was contacted and started working on the project.
The phrase was early on. I have no idea what that means.
I would have to go back and look exactly. I think it was early spring of 21, if I had to guess.
Have you done work for the Rastetter family or conglomerate corporations of Bruce Rastetter before?
No.
And did he call you?
No.
Who contacted you? How were you hired?
One of Bruce's hired people and I began discussions.
All right. And have you been paid to date for any of your work, consulting work, traveling around to meetings, etc.?
Yes.
All right. And to date, how much have you been paid for that work?
And I don't know the exact amount without looking.
And what are the rates you are going to charge them to do the locating and all of that kind of initial front and pre-construction work?
I'm gonna object on the specific rates being some trade secret and confidential data. It's a competitive industry, and we're now talking about specific amounts. If there's a way to keep it more general, he and the company are going to make money off it. That's clear coming into this.
Can you ask it generally?
Well, yeah, I don't have any idea how that's trade secret, but what's the length of your contract?
The duration of the warranty issues.
And Summit could fire you at any time, correct?
Potentially, yes.
And if they sell the company, the new owner could terminate your contract at any time, right?
I would assume.
Yeah. Now, you painted a picture here today, sir, as if there's never been a problem in laying tile, and there's never been a problem repairing tile, and your company just does everything wonderful. And if so, congratulations to you. But tell us, in your entire life, have you ever experienced a challenging field when you were laying tile? And talk about some of the challenges.
Of course, I think with any construction projects, there's always challenges.
Okay, well, let the commission understand, what are some of the challenges that you, in your experience, expect to see in low-lying, wet, swampy North Dakota ground that you are going to be asked to work on?
I would say our biggest challenges in North Dakota, obviously, our grade. It's a very flat terrain area, but our high precision GPS systems and laser systems ensure that that's done properly. We've got 50 years of field experience installing drain tile systems all over the Midwest to weigh on. There's some areas in this project that will have some high water table sands that we've installed some very difficult projects in and been successful, that we will be, I'm assuming, dealing with at some point in the project. Other than that, we've been doing drain tile for 50 years. My grandpa started the business, and earlier you had asked about us getting paid and compensated and being biased. This isn't a project that's about Summit and Ellingson. This is about a carbon pipeline and landowners and how to help improve that. And we're going to be here. We've been here. We've been in the Red River Valley for 20 years. We'll be here for another 20 years. And we have a reputation to uphold with our current customers and growers. We're not going to jeopardize that on one project. And I think that should be something that the Public Utility Commission should understand for us as a company.
And again, that reputation for you to uphold, you don't have a contract with a single landowner, correct?
Correct.
All right.
We do work for a lot of them.
Well, how many affected by this pipeline do you work for in North Dakota?
Several.
How many?
I don't have an exact count.
More than 10?
More than 10.
More than 20?
Probably more than 20.
More than 30?
I would have to look.
Okay. So for the other hundreds and hundreds that you don't work for, again, you won't have a contract, and in terms of your reputation and your work, the landowner has to look back to Summit ultimately if there's any issues, correct?
Correct.
Now, you talk about locating existing tile lines using GPS. Have you ever run into difficulty with pipelines that are full of murky water or are particularly lower beneath the surface and difficulties locating them precisely?
I'm not sure I understand your question. You were talking about pipelines?
I'm sorry, tile lines.
Tile lines. And your question was?
Have you ever had difficulty locating a tile
No.
line? Okay. Capping lines, do you cap lines when you're doing repairs?
If needed?
And is it true that capping lines can risk a blowout on the other part of the system?
No.
It's impossible?
No.
Okay,
Not sure what you're talking about.
well, tile lines are designed to have water drain through them, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so if we've experienced a rainfall, do you ever cap a line that you're working on so the water isn't leaking into the area where you're working?
No.
All right. How do you deal with that?
Temporary repair them.
I'm sorry, sir.
We temporary repair them.
What does that mean?
Means if the tile line is flowing water, we temporarily repair it for the week or two that it will be open to lay the pipeline, and then we put a permanent repair when it's done. Ensure that water continues to flow.
Would you agree that dirt settles over time?
If it's not compacted correctly,
Okay. And do you put a channel iron under each tile, or how do you support the tile?
no. As stated before, we use a heavy highway tile encased in a corrugated steel culvert.
In your work in trenching and either repairing or preparing to lay tile lines, what's the deepest root system you've seen for corn, for instance?
3 to 4 feet?
Have you ever seen it to 6 feet?
Probably not personally, no.
And is your preference, is the best practice to, if I called you up and I wanted you on my North Dakota farm to put some new tile lines and there was a CO2 pipeline already there, is it best practice to go under or over that existing pipeline?
This depends on the design. Every field's different.
Do you believe you'd have to get Summit's permission to go under or over their pipeline?
Typically, we call in a utility 1 call. Pipeline owner provides a watchdog if required, and we cross the pipeline. There's no permission that I've seen.
All right. Are you aware if Summit has a veto whether or not they would allow a tile line to be placed under or over if they believed it would interfere in any way with their pipeline? Do they have a veto so a landowner could not locate a tile line?
I'll object to it. The same question was asked 2 different ways. The first one was, does he have an understanding? The second one was, without qualification, do they have a veto? That's calling for a legal conclusion under documents that this witness has said his company is not party to. Those questions can be asked of Mr. Powell if he wants to talk about Summit's position.
Well, what's your understanding?
Yeah, I'll allow him to answer as far as he understands the relationship.
I am not privy to any of that information, as attorney had said.
What's the minimum grade that you need to maintain from the start of the tile line to where it outflows or exits the particular property?
It's all based on the engineering and design of the system.
If you were designing a tile line, would you prefer not to have to deal with a pipeline?
I really don't think it impacts it at all. We've tiled around pipelines for 50 years.
Would you agree it would be your preference to avoid having to deal with a pipeline or other underground structures like that when laying out a tiling system?
No, we deal with underground utilities all the time, every day.
All right, and so my question wasn't what do you do? My question is, would it be your preference to not have to deal with an existing pipeline and modify the design of the tile system?
As I stated before, whether we engineer a farm with or without a pipeline or a utility in it, we've dealt with them for years.
Did Summit ever give you, sir, a handout or bullet points or any type of literature or information whereby you believe you've come up to speed on their project, what they're doing, and to help you interact with landowners?
No.
That's been all oral?
Actually, we provided them bullet points for the landowners.
All right, so any information that Summit is providing to landowners relative to how Summit intends to handle tile lines, either a repair or replacement, would be information that you gave Summit?
Objection as to foundation. There's lots of Summit employees having lots of conversations with landowners, and he's asking this witness to say what all of those conversations consist of.
No, I'm asking this witness and his employees.
Yeah, I'm not sure he has a foundation to answer what Summit employees are telling landowners.
Okay, let's start over. Sir, you just said that Summit didn't give you information relative to talking points about tile lines, but you, meaning your company, gave them information. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And is, to your understanding, is that the information you provided to Summit, are those the statements and representations and warranties that are being told to landowners at these various town meetings that you and Summit are putting on?
I can't speak for every Summit land agent, as we are not in every meeting and every conference with every landowner. But when we are involved with a drain tile issue or a drain tile question, I know our team is providing the same responses.
Well, how do you know that if you can't speak for what they're saying?
Because we've put together, several different, drain tile fact documents to ensure that, drain tile mitigation is handled fairly across the entire project in the same way.
All right. And do you have any idea what, and maybe no, but do you have any idea what Summit's process is for evaluating or determining a valid damage claim?
No.
That's not something they've discussed with you?
On the project, no.
Okay. Now, when you said after your work, the farmer's tile line would be as good or better, what do you rely upon to make the statement that it would be, after damaged, your repair would be better than the pre-damaged working tile line?
In some cases where there could be older concrete or clay tile in some of the farms we're going to be crossing, it will be upgraded to a HDPE plastic tile. The steel culvert gives it support. It's different than the original installation. Like I said, we will ensure that the tile is at or better than it was before it was cut by the pipeline.
But just to be clear, when you say insure, again, you don't have any responsibility directly to insure or warranty that work to the landowner, though, correct?
For sure, in our partnership with Summit.
Okay, but again, I just want to be clear. Ultimately, this all falls on Summit. Is that your understanding with your contract with them?
Summit and Ellingson, as I stated before, we have a reputation in the industry. We have lots of customers along this pipeline route, and it's in our best interest, along with Summit's, to ensure that this is handled correctly with all the landowners, and that a drain tile expert is involved to ensure that that happens.
And I certainly understand that it's your intent. I just want to be clear. We all have great intentions. I just want to be clear what you understand the documents to be. And I think you've already established that you do not have any direct warranty to any landowner, and the landowner's remedy would be through Summit. Is that your understanding?
I'm going to object. This is about the fourth or fifth time we have done this line of questions.
I agree. I think he's addressed this already, and just for time's sake.
I agree too. It's just in his last response, he changed his prior answers. So, but that's fine. If we're going to stand on the prior answers, that's fine.
We can keep asking him. When witnesses get the same question, they tend to give more and different information because they think they need to answer it again and again and again, more and different. Just go around and around.
Well, I need to establish the difference between this gentleman's intention and what he hopes versus what is legally the case from the contracts that he does or doesn't have. At the end of the day, the landowners only care about who do I deal with if there's a problem, not his intention.
Well, and I think his answers have been clear on that the contracts with landowners and Summit, and they're contracted with Summit.
Very good. Sir, what percentage of North Dakota tile is clay?
Very little.
What percentage of the landowners impacted by this project tile is clay?
It's an ambiguous question.
Okay. What part don't you understand? You understand that there's a.
You're asking me to answer a question about what percentage of the tile across 5 states is clay that we're going to be repairing.
Well, let's stick with North Dakota.
Very little.
And what do you base that on?
Just historical drainage information.
Okay. Have you pulled historical drainage information on every single potentially affected parcel on the project in North Dakota?
There's no such thing as historical drainage information on every single parcel.
Okay, so when you say that's what you rely upon, that's not very helpful.
It's generalized information as provided by universities and different people in the agricultural industry. It's 50 years of experience.
Okay, but your 50 years of experience doesn't tell you whether there's clay tile on these particular affected parcels or not, correct?
It does.
Okay, so then if you have that experience, tell me what percentage of the potentially affected parcels by this hazardous pipeline containing clay tile.
I don't think anyone can tell you that answer.
All right, that's how we can speed this along. You don't know, correct?
Yeah, no.
All right. All right, I don't have anything further. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Chrisman?
One of the things that I want to clarify is what you said the materials are for that splice. I wrote down a heavier highway plastic encased in a steel culvert. Is that a proper description?
Yep.
So in a previous hearing, it was discussed with the company that there would be potentially some winter installation with this project. So imagining this to be kind of a year-round situation or what, as they're digging, when do you do all these splices?
We typically do the splices behind the contractor installing the pipeline. So as they're cut, we document them. As the pipeline is laid in, we come behind and repair them.
How far behind? Like a couple days behind, or are you working on the same ditch and like
Very, very close.
100 feet behind them?
Yeah, we're a day or two behind. Their typical operations are to cut the ditch, install the pipe, and backfill. And after they've done temporary backfill, we come in and support them with fixing all the tile.
Okay, and then, so you do that, and then is the backfill around them, around these splices? But let's say it's on a place where you're crossing laterally, and so every 60 or 80 feet or something is another one. Is Ellingson's, do you do the backfilling then and put the topsoil over, or does Summit come back and do that after you're done with the splicing, a day after they put the pipeline in?
We typically backfill around our repair, and then the general contractor typically has a topsoiling crew that comes behind and puts the topsoil on when we're done.
I think you said along the way that ideally you like to leave about a foot of clearance between the tiling pipe and other utilities. Is that correct?
Typically, yes.
So when you come along, when they come along with the pipeline, and I believe this pipeline will be at its shallowest, about the top of the pipe, about 4 feet to the surface. So if there's a place where the tiling is near that same amount, is it your understanding that the company will need to dig the CO2 pipeline in a little deeper there so you can maintain grade and some distance between?
Correct.
And how much is your recommendation that be?
As I stated before, 1 foot of clearance is typically what we shoot for.
Do you think is that a reasonable requirement?
Yes, I think it is.
And I'm from the western part of the state, and we don't do much tiling out there. So if the two conflict for elevation, the farm tiling, you can't have like a trap in it or a hump over it. It has to maintain grade, correct?
Correct.
Work.
Yep.
So in those instances, the pipeline is going to have to be deeper in order to
Yes.
to make it workable.
Yep. I think back to my comment earlier, how Summit's approach this project is going to eliminate a lot of them issues. We've been on projects before where that has been an issue, and they've actually had to lower the pipeline to ensure the drain tile works, and they've done that. We've been part of jobs where they've done that, but with our involvement early, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen.
Or the option is to put a header along the whole length of that, and
yes, we could do that too. Yep.
So when you get a little further west, and you actually have some little hills, so you're maintaining a grade that only drops like a few feet in a half a mile, correct?
It just depends on each farm. You know, every farm's different. Every farm has different terrain, and our engineering team designs every tile project we do with different grades and elevations on the tile associated with the lay of the land.
But generally, the laterals are running at a very minimal slope, always maintaining that slope.
Yes, always have to maintain grade to get the water to.
And so if it's going along there, and it's generally 3.5 feet deep, but now you run into a little hill where there's an elevation of 3 or 4 feet, that tiling lateral will be maybe 7 feet deep at that point, correct?
Could be, yes. Yep.
What's the deepest you ever put in laterals?
Laterals are typically installed between 3 and 3.5 feet deep. It all depends on this type of soil and the spacing. Main lines can potentially be deeper based on the grade and the outlet and the terrain of a farm.
Have you run into small hills where you have laterals 10 or 15 feet deep?
I wouldn't say that deep. You know, we have put laterals in where they're a little deeper in the hill to potentially drain a lower area on the back side of the hill, maybe 6 to 7 feet deep. Mains we've put in 15 feet deep.
And in those instances, is it all right for the pipeline, in your opinion, to be over the top then? Or how do they navigate this? Or do they still need to go deeper yet with the hydrocarbon line?
I would say in an existing situation like that, you're probably going to find it being pretty rare that would occur. I think that's a pretty limited anomaly. But we would have to deal with that on a site-by-site basis on how we would handle that. A lot of it would depend on what the landowner wants.
And now when you deal with a future project where someone wants to put in tiling system, when you run into utilities, do you just choose the right grade that works best and then determine whether you're going over or under those utilities?
Correct.
And I would presume that in most cases it's probably under.
Some cases. It just depends. Some cases it may be over, but a lot of cases it's probably under. Especially in existing pipeline.
All the literature I've ever seen on tiling just kind of showed the kind of boot that it's pulled through. So when you get to a fiber line or significant pipeline or something, I mean, so you don't cut them off and then go back and
no,
them spliced. You manually dig around them and work and lay the tiling underneath.
Yep, we'll do a manual utility crossing. We'll spot it, locate it, install the pipe underneath it.
And so, when you run into those situations, does that add to the cost of the project for them? Because now they need to go a little deeper than they otherwise would have. And that involves a long distance so that you keep the flow going. Or I'm trying to figure out how much additional cost is involved to tiling when you put a utility across the land in advance.
It just depends on the situation. I mean, it could be as simple as just the cost of crossing the utility. In certain cases, there may have to be a little bit of design requirement to make it work. I don't think it's a huge impact, but yes, you're right. There's definitely a small cost increase.
Have you done a tiling job on land where there was an existing hydrocarbon pipeline before?
I'm not sure we've done one on a hydrocarbon pipeline, but we've done it on lots of pipelines.
And do regulations or those utility owners require that their personnel be on hand when you're crossing?
A lot of them, yes. There'll be what's called a watchdog. We send a personnel that verify as we're excavating, help us locate it, work together with us as we cross it to ensure everything goes right.
So you call in a locate to 988 and they mark it, you see that they have something there, and when you get to that time when you're close to it, you need to contact them and make sure their personnel are.
It's usually right on the one call ticket. Usually the utility will require a watchdog to put a contact number and just say, hey, you're going to cross this utility, we need to be present. And then our teams are trained to call them.
And do you pay them for that?
Pay the utility company?
Yes.
No.
They monitor
just do
that
it.
on their own.
Yep.
And so in the case, if you're doing the tiling where they're pretty close together, a quarter of land, I'm thinking you could have like 100 laterals going. Is that?
Yeah, anywhere from 50 to 100, possibly, yeah.
Okay. And so when you would be putting those in, and if this pipeline were here, they would need to be there day after day while you're putting each one of those in.
No, not necessarily. Typically, we would design the system where we would parallel the pipeline on both sides and then just cross it in one or two places as we needed to get a proper outlet.
No other questions? Thank you.
Commissioner Haugenhofer?
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
You indicated you started working at your grandfather's company in 1994, correct?
Correct.
So how many years do you have working directly with the installation of drain tiles?
29
You said you only are like 5% in the field
today.
today.
So I spent my career, started as a laborer in the field, moved into our surveying and engineering department, spent a long time designing and engineering tile systems. After that, I worked with landowners, did some sales things, but I've ultimately been responsible for our entire agricultural engineering and production group for at least the last 20 years.
Okay. So you have experience with installation, maintenance. Let's talk about like a lifetime of a project, like from putting it in. Have you ever had to replace, or what would you say your number one reason for maintenance is on drain tiles?
Older systems, a lot of the Midwest is full of old clay and concrete tile put in the 50s and 60s, and over time it'll deteriorate or plug up or collapse, and we end up coming and repairing that, or some landowners will choose to retile if it's bad enough. Root intrusion near tree lines is another common repair for drain tile. If there's some tile put in and a grove has grown up, can potentially plug up tile.
Okay, so have you seen other pipelines come in affect any drain tiles in the past?
Not sure I totally understand your question.
Like work, utility work, natural gas pipeline, anything?
Yeah, I mean, there's utilities going in every day. I mean, our company does a lot of work not only for pipeline, but we do work for, we just did a huge project for a major highway construction in Minnesota that went on that affected a lot of drain tile. We rerouted all the drain tile from Minnesota DOT around a new section of Highway 14 in southern Minnesota. We also work for several renewable energy companies. Solar and wind farms have the same issue pipelines do, as they're installing underground cable to connect the wind farms or the solar farms. We offer drain tile mitigation services to them.
So what were the biggest issues when you see projects like this coming in that affect the drain tiles?
I mean, quite frankly, and probably my biggest concern on all the projects we get involved in is the landowners having trust that whatever contractor is building the job or whatever company is developing the property, that they've partnered with someone in the drain tile industry that can understand how important drain tile is on their land and become a partner to ensure that it all gets taken care of and fixed correctly. And to me, I hear it all the time on projects that we're not involved in. And it's like our drain tile, what maybe wasn't repaired correctly, or there was issues. And that's, to me, in the industry, what we hear is the largest and biggest concern for landowners is ensuring that someone who knows what they're doing for drain tile is on the site helping with it.
And you would agree that that's a very valid concern?
Of course, we've seen that a lot.
Okay, you talked about you've been working with Summit for 15 months, or now it seems a little bit longer. And how many of your employees are directly working on this project?
At this time right now, we probably have, in any given week, 10 different employees. We have a GIS team that's digitizing tile maps. We have surveyors that are uncovering aerial imagery for tile maps. We have 2 internal project management consultants that meeting weekly with the Summit team, addressing any sort of landowner concerns across the 5 states that come up or questions around drain tile.
So you have about 10 employees working full-time on this project?
Yes.
Okay. We heard testimony in Gwinner from some of the landowners that there has been no communication regarding their concerns with tiling. So how many landowners have you guys dealt with in North Dakota in addressing tiling concerns?
I don't know the exact number. We have a team of people working on that every day. But really, at the end of the day, the land agents that Summit has provided are the ones that work directly with us to get the landowners' issues taken care of. So if there's someone in Gwinner that has some concerns or question, my recommendation is just to ask their land agent to get Ellingson involved, and we'll be there.
Okay. Well, so you're saying that if a landowner has concerns about the tiling, they should get a hold of Summit or the land agent, and they'll get a hold of you, and then you'll work with them.
Correct.
You said you wrote comments and provided them to Summit regarding tiling to talk about.
Yes.
Correct. Can we get a copy of those comments that have been provided to Summit so we know what is being said or communicated to the landowners?
Yeah, I think every landowner is given a drain tile fact sheet.
Yeah, I guess I don't know exactly what he's referencing in terms of the notes that were provided, if it's the drain tile fact sheet or more frequently
I'll
asked.
clarify it. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah, yes.
Okay, thank you. You said several times that Summit goes above and beyond regarding their efforts with drain tiling. Comparison to what? How can you make that statement? What are you comparing it to?
Just past history. I mean, we've been involved in other pipeline projects or attempted to get involved early on in other utility projects. And the typical progression of a project is to do the engineering, acquire the property, acquire the land, get all the pipeline or renewable energy line, whatever the utility may be, designed, get a contractor hired, and then they bring in a drain tile contractor or sometimes fix it themselves at the tail end of a project, sometimes with skilled workforce in agricultural drain tile, sometimes not. And that, to me, has been atypical of a project in the past. So when I say Summit has went above and beyond, they've taken a new approach to mitigating agricultural drain tile by involving a drain tile expert like us early on in the planning stages and ensuring that we're contracted directly with them so that we have control on how the repairs are done and ensuring that the landowners' issues are answered and taken care of properly versus, potentially a general contractor that doesn't have experience in drain tile mitigation. If that answered your question.
It does, but it seems to me that if you guys are the experts, you've had limited contact with landowners regarding their concerns, that there's a gap there. And if they have to go to the land person, they're not the experts in tiling. So I'm just going to say, I think there's a gap, and that's not on you. I have no further questions at this time.
All right, thank you. Mr. Dawson?
Judge Hogan, Mr. Ellingson. I'm from Western North Dakota as well, and so I closest I come to drain tile is my downspouts on my house. So,
it's still drainage.
So these might be rudimentary questions, but it's corrugated pipe buried underground, correct?
Yes, corrugated plastic pipe.
Okay. And how much would it cost if I had a quarter section that needed to be drain tiled in the Red River Valley that was perfectly flat? And I'm just trying to get a scale of cost. You can say how much it is per foot in general.
I mean, on average, it's probably somewhere between $800 and $1,200 an acre, just depending on the outlet and the engineered design of the system. Every project varies.
So when you do a repair, I'm picturing in my head the steel culvert, and I'm picturing in my head at right angles, but it probably doesn't have to be at a right angle. It could be shifted this way. And so you have this trench, and how wide's the trench? 4 feet, typically. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take a steel pipe and run your corrugated pipe through it and you're gonna build bases to, it's gonna act as a bridge.
Correct.
Okay, and then you're gonna have bases to your bridge and it's gonna run into the soil on either side.
Right.
Okay, and how far is it gonna run into each side?
It just depends on the way the tile's running, but typically, we're digging back several feet on each side, exposing the tile, getting it where it's good and clean, and then reconnecting. Most of the time, we're using somewhere between a 10 and 20 foot culvert based on the pipeline size.
And you're doing the digging back and refilling on those little bases for the bridge,
Yes,
not Summit.
we are.
And what's the limit to this bridge? Let's say you start, instead of cutting at a right angle, let's say you cut at an angle, the trench is there and you're cutting at an angle that's much longer. The span becomes longer because of the angle. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, we typically don't see a lot of that, but we do, reroute them a little bit if that becomes too big of an issue. Header system, as we talked about earlier. Also, we'll provide extra sandbags in them cases if the span gets to be a little longer.
So in short, it gets more expensive the more.
For sure.
Things don't line up.
Sure. That's why the pre-planning is so important.
I have no further questions.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Malberg, do you have that fact sheet today, or are you going to submit it after the hearing?
I'm going to confirm what we have and just make sure that what we do give is what he's talking about, so we don't create confusion. So if it's on a break or later, I'm not sure yet.
Sure. Okay, that's fine. Do you have any redirect?
I don't, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Pelham, any further questions?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Shook, Mr. Jordy, any further questions?
Just one. Sir, have you ever had any or experienced any issues where the plastic is connected up to existing clay as opposed to having a brand new all plastic towel system?
Yes.
And tell me about those problems that you've observed.
If it's done correctly, we don't have any problems. We connect into existing clay lines all the time.
Okay. And I appreciate that. I mean, if anything in life is done correctly, there aren't problems. But have you ever heard of issues, circumstances where you're connecting two different materials of tile line?
Workmanship is probably the biggest issue. If the proper coupler connection isn't used from the clay to the plastic.
And a question was asked about personnel. I believe you said you had 10 people working now. What is your understanding, if this project was approved in North Dakota, of how much trenching would be happening simultaneously? I'm trying to get an understanding of what you believe the scope of the work in terms of the personnel you have to handle the work.
It's really going to be based on schedule and weather with the general contractors. Our understanding is there's going to be broken into several spreads, which is pretty typical of a pipeline project, and we will be there to support each spread as needed.
Are you the contractor for all states that Summit proposes to go through?
For the drain tile mitigation, yes.
All right. Are you aware if these every state approves and they get all the approvals? Are you aware if they're planning to start construction simultaneously in all states or one state first?
I think simultaneously in several states.
All right. And there's no prohibition on you hiring subcontractors to assist with your work in the contract, correct?
Correct.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions?
I do not.
Commissioner Haugen Hoffert?
Thank you. When you are out there doing the work and examining the tile, is the landowner with you?
He can be. It just depends on each parcel's different. Some landowners may not live there. They may be investors, but yeah, they're more than welcome to ask questions.
Will they be contacted to say that they're working in the area and inspecting it? Will you guys be reaching out to them to let them know?
Yeah, I'm assuming the Summit team usually takes care of all the notifications to landowners.
So Summit will be contacting each individual landowner that's affected by tiling?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dawson, any other questions? All right.